Amarillo and News Channel 10-2. I'm David Lovejoy,
I'm Chuckalicious, Chuck Williams.
and we're here with Mr. Shannon Duncan. Let me get my seat adjusted here. Welcome back to the chat. Hope your day's off to a great start. Today, we're joined by Mr. Shannon Duncan. We're going to talk about a subject some might consider taboo. And Chuck, you mentioned this earlier that several years ago you couldn't even talk about this on the airwaves.
That's true.
Now, yeah, we're in a different place. Using psychedelics to heal trauma. Shannon Duncan, tell us a little bit about what this is. Why psychedelics, and how can it help us effectively treat trauma? Because Lord knows, especially after the pandemic and other things in our world, there's a lot of trauma out there.
Sure, and thank you for having me on your show. Psychedelics help give access to yourself in a guided therapeutic session in ways that traditional talk therapy or body-centered therapies often have a very difficult time getting to. You know, we develop a sense of fear of our own feelings or certain aspects of our own feelings. And when you go in on the psychedelics, they help open and soften and allow you to give expression to those feelings in a safe and supported way.
You know,
And I think one big thing. Go ahead, Chuck. Go ahead.
You know, we're talking about psychedelics. Like magic mushrooms and all this other stuff? Like specifically, uh, opening your conscious. You know, we had Dr. Timothy Leary. He was expelling this stuff 50 years ago. Are we still on that same? Are we still on that same mindset? Are we still in that same way of thinking, or what?
No, things have come forward a lot, you know, through the war on drugs and the Just Say No campaigns. There's a lot of propaganda put out about psychedelics, that they fry your brain, or, you know, some of them will put holes in your brain, and, you know, that's all been dispelled. And it's these are substances you want to treat with a great deal of respect and approach with caution and be educated on them. There's a lot to know. They're definitely not toys. They're not a joke. But they do psychologically give you the power to go in and explore, especially when you're working with a professional therapist that is trained and experienced in this, or there are people called psychedelic guides who are deeply experienced in this. And so they can help support you to where you go in and you can look at things that in everyday life are too difficult to look at, too hard to look at. And that's really where their power comes in. That's for going in deep and giving expression to challenging emotions. But you also get things that are called insights. So you'll be on a psychedelic, and, you know, anybody that's done this when they're camping or at a music festival, it's just all of a sudden you see yourself or your life from a new perspective. And that's called an insight. It's like, whoa. And so you take that insight back with you into your everyday life. And that's how people really tend to change and grow with psychedelics.
Shannon, tell us what led us down this path. What led you down this path to experiment with trauma? Was it a devastating moment in your life that kind of opened your eyes to it, or was it something that you looked into before?
Well, I had, you know, as in the journey of my own life, I started off with some childhood trauma that was unhealed. I went to traditional therapy, and we made beautiful work in understanding what it was and how it affected me, but I could never get into the core of it. I was introduced to psychedelics not as a recreational tool, but as a tool for personal exploration, and I used them on my own for quite a while, as a lot of people do, and received huge benefit from that. But then I was introduced to somebody who did guided sessions, and that was a big turning point in my life. Before that, I was really struggling emotionally, struggling with what was labeled wrongly as depression. There was moments of suicidal despair. And with this guided session, man, it just cracked me open in a way that I had never been open before. And I was able to let out so much. And that started a multi-year process of doing this pretty regularly with a variety of different psychedelics that has changed my life in absolutely profound ways.
Shannon, let me ask this. You were just talking about insights.
Hmm.
Can that be can that be confused with the word perspectives or the insights that you have about yourself? Uh,
Mhm.
just what does that mean as far as perspectives as you see yourself?
Hmm.
Sure. Yeah. So, somebody who maybe is having challenges due to their own trauma with anger, but
Right,
before they were thinking that they were justified in being angry. And in a psychedelic session, they might say, "Oh man, that's my own pain causing me to be angry, and I'm putting that on other people. I see that now." Well, now they've got a new perspective on themselves that they can go and they can work with in more traditional therapy to help open and explore and heal the parts that are causing them to need to be angry to feel safe. And that's one example of a kind of an insight. I had an experience before I started the guided stuff. I had an experience. I was on what's known as ecstasy or MDMA, and I was hanging out with a
right,
friend, and I had the first experience in my entire life in my late 20s of feeling love and acceptance for myself. And I never knew that it was missing until I felt it in that moment. I'm like, oh my God, people can feel like this. And so that gave me a
right,
new perspective that I could take into my life and have a new experience of life with that available to me now, where before it was never available to me. Those are just the entry level kind of things that can happen for you in a psychedelic experience. And insights are to psychedelics as sweating is to exercise, right? When you start to do
right.
it, it's just going to come. And
That's right.
but it also goes much more deep. It can go way deeper. The experience can, when it's professionally guided and properly supported, you can go deep into yourself to really bring about powerful levels of emotional healing.
Last two questions for you, Shannon. We've seen this with the use of medical marijuana and how it's a state by state thing. My
Yeah.
two questions to you is, uh, how do you go about saying, I want to look into this, I want to experiment? And the second thing is, do we have to look at certain state or local laws when we talk about this as a treatment?
Yeah, that's an important question. And it's a big part of what I covered in the book I just released. Because I wanted people to go into it eyes wide open. There's a common
Right,
misconception that's being pushed through the media that this is some kind of a magic bullet and you don't have to be challenged at all. You just take these and you go through the experience and everything's better. And certainly things can be better by going through the experience, but to go deep into trauma, it's work and it's commitment. But right now, there are some states in Colorado and in Oregon, they're putting together programs where people can pay to participate. And there are varying levels of those being effective. Those therapists are a little handcuffed by the bureaucracies for some aspects that make it effective. But I'm not going to discourage anyone from trying that. And then there are still underground sources of highly qualified guides that are available, but you're going to have to network out to find them. Um,
right.
that have decades of experience and are often licensed therapists or psychologists themselves, highly educated and experienced in working with trauma, that can also work with people. And that's how I have been working for these last few years, is in that more gray market area, because I find that the modalities that they use to be more effective.
You
The
know,
name of the book is Coming Full Circle Using Psychedelics to Heal Trauma. It is a detailed and informative guide on using these to heal trauma that is geared toward the lay person. Shannon, thank you so much for your time this morning. You can find a copy of this wherever you like to purchase books at. We'll also put a link up to Shannon on our website. Thank you, Shannon, for taking time out and discussing this important issue with us.
Thanks for having me.
Anytime, sir. We'll take a quick break and we go to the dogs right after this, right here on the chat.